Um, so,
Hello.
good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this year's panel of the Sogody Winter Summit 2023. I'm here with our entire team from Sogodycom, and I think other participants will be joining gradually during this call. It's an honor to have you all here for what promises to be an enlightening discussion on the cutting-edge advancements in artificial intelligence. Today, we delve into the theme AI in action and development post-AI, exploring the practical applications and future prospects of AI technologies and software engineering. Let me introduce our esteemed panelists. First, I'm delighted to introduce Dita Goshi, a renowned DeFi consultant and developer. Dita has an impressive background as a co-founder and CTO at BlockNFi and a founder at Decisio. He's a blockchain entrepreneur, currently building Web3 Wiz, a Web3 no-code tool for decentralized applications. His experience makes his perspective particularly interesting on how AI is affecting decentralization of software. Next, we have Ehsanur Kaygin, the visionary founder and CEO of Highrise. Ehsanur's leadership and innovative approach in the tech industry, particularly in AI, have significantly influenced the sector with her company Highrise, the most accurate resume parsing software using cutting-edge AI tech. Her insights today are eagerly anticipated. Thank you for joining us, Ehsanur. We're also joined by Petrit Rama, a PhD researcher in machine learning and autonomous driving at the University of Kaiserslautern. Petrit's academic and practical experiences in machine learning provide a unique perspective that enriches our understanding of AI's applications, particularly in autonomous driving. Petrit was also a teaching assistant during my bachelor's studies, and it's always a great pleasure to meet and discuss with him, especially in this panel format. Last but not least, Saurabh Suri, an AI tech creator, coder, and blockchain manager. Saurabh's creative endeavors in being a fractional head of product, indie builder, and blockchain intertwined with building impressive technology experiences for Fortune 500 companies exemplify the innovative spirit that drives our industry forward. Looking forward to hearing your thoughts on development post-AI today, Saurabh. And lastly, moderating this panel today, I'm Sunim, lead R&D engineer and co-founder of Aldastra Labs, the AI powerhouse of Sogody. I'd like to dive in right with a question which I think most people are curious today. Considering your extensive background in DeFi and blockchain, how do you see LLMs or machine learning transforming financial technologies and services, especially in the development fields? And how has that impacted you personally during your professional?
Hi, Sunim. Thanks a lot for the invitation and being part of this great panel. As you mentioned briefly, I'm working on Web3 Wiz these days, which is like a no-code tool for Web3 development. And what am I actually doing is that I've been coding these decentralized applications for about 7 to 8 years now. And when you keep doing that over and over again, you just realize that you're almost like doing the same thing. And maybe you also see this at Sogody sometimes that a lot of processes, they are recurring. And so what I'm trying to do is basically automate myself. And I'm using a lot of ChatGPT to do that. So I'm not even sure if I can call myself a solo founder. It's like me plus ChatGPT plus Midjourney. and I'm kind of proud of it. So far, I would say that ChatGPT is kind of like, let's call it a junior hire that sometimes surprises you negatively, sometimes positively, like does something when you're like, wow, how'd you do that? But most of the time it's quite exceptional, and you kind of get what you give in a way. And another use case that I see where AI can really flourish in the blockchain sphere is auditing, because you have a lot of auditing teams that have very specific ways that they do audit on smart contracts, and the errors that you find, they can be quite similar to each other, but this knowledge exists like in silos. So there's an audited company that has a different methodology, and they keep doing what they're doing, and that's what the others do, kind of like general financial auditing. But if you somehow have a specific LLM and can do that more specifically, then it makes it much more like affordable, because currently, you know, you're for like a simple audit, you're looking at $10,000, which makes, you know, launching blockchain applications not as cheap as like other software as a service applications.
That makes complete sense, and I'd like to emphasize and talk about more about considering ChatGPT as a junior hire. So, Esra, you're as a leader in a tech-driven company, and especially an AI-driven company. Do you consider ChatGPT a junior hire, and how has that impacted you personally, but also professionally in terms of running a company?
Yeah, would I consider it as junior hire? I think you can see it that way. Definitely, our developers, so we develop AI models, so our developers do use it as a junior hire or your assistant to accelerate whatever capabilities you are. Just like Deet said, you get what you give. So the more senior you are yourself or better you are in engineering prompts, the more you get from it. But then on a business side, so I've been a leader within an AI company. This is my second time. So I exited the first one. And there is a big difference. The first one I exited in 2012. And now, a decade later, I'm doing AI again, and it's a different world. How is it different for me? I'm not an engineer. I studied economics, but I do, because I'm in the industry for so long, I do understand certain things. But any AI model that we can use really help me understand topics better, building models better, asking better questions, and also become more creative in like how we solve problems. It's really like your assistant who can tell, like your teacher who can tell you like how the models work or how you can create solutions and how you can find creative ways to work with your own team so you don't ask questions that are not in their level, so you can be very technical. And I also really like that it explains it in a way that, you know, anybody can understand. So for me, I'm not the engineer, but it helps me understand it in my own language, and for engineers it just steps into their own language. That is also a big benefit. Personally, I think that this will grow the industry even more because everybody is like supercharged at this point.
Yeah, something stuck with me. You said with GPT and generally transformer models, what you give is what you get, and the process of being able to explain easily a complex concept. In that sense, Petrit, from an academic research perspective, do you think that ChatGPT helps in the terms of what you give is what you get, and does it actually help as a research assistant? Does it help with onboarding a lab team with research assistants through the process?
First of all, nice to see a lot of people here interested in this wonderful event. Thank you for the invitation again. I mean, this is a drawback of AI models overall, not just ChatGPT. So whatever you give as an input, you get an output. So this is a bias that we sometimes as a humans also bring towards the AI models as well. So now working for some time in machine learning, and especially in the domain of decision-making system for autonomous driving, we have to be very careful sometimes when we design such systems, because sometimes it's not very critical, but sometimes you have also to take in consider also the health of people, such as in case of autonomous driving. We have to make sure that we also interpret everything that comes out of it. Interpretability as an aspect is very important. So yeah, it's a quite challenging problem to have. But at the same time, it's nice to work in such big problems, such as with autonomous driving, with sensors, with all these techniques nowadays of AI models. Regarding ChatGPT, we also use it for different sense, not just in machine learning, but also writing papers when it comes, also for writing proposals. Here, industry and academia is very near to each other, so it helps us sometimes to get better ideas for fields that are not our expertise, I would say.
That's interesting. You mentioned using ChatGPT to write proposals and papers. Isn't there a bias in terms of writing papers with ChatGPT? Do peer-reviewed art journals actually sanction that in terms of the peer review process?
Yes, you're correct. When I said writing papers, I don't mean that writing everything. So it means just you have to get, yes, you have to get some ideas, sometimes state of the art, or when you get papers, you can easily with ChatGPT get the summary out of it, or sometimes grammar, translation. English is not my first language, that's why it helps sometimes in grammar, spelling. So in that sense, I mean, and overall, I like to do writing everything from scratch, also working when it comes also to developing. So everything is safe, I would say.
That makes perfect sense. English is not my first language either. I tend to speak a lot. So yeah, when it comes to grammar and when it comes to being semantically correct, ChatGPT can do wonders with that. So
can I tap into that paper part? Like if you're an AI company or you develop models, like a big portion of whatever you do is research. So we are all researchers in a way, and writing papers is very important. Also write a paper now, and I mean, anybody who would say like writing a paper with ChatGPT is like, you're a foe. It's no. Wouldn't then I would think that they didn't write a paper before, because writing a paper you need to have a lot of research. Like a large language model can't produce those results. It's a lot of calculation of the results. The large language model, so ChatGPT, for example, just helps you, do it faster and check your work. But in the end of the day, writing papers, a lot of work. So
Yeah, if I can connect with that, Isranur, I think one very helpful way that I found it is when you go into kind of like this ping pong mode. So like you think of something, you don't have it all cleared out. It could be an idea or a concept or some tangent of the research, and you kind of, all right, ChatGPT, this is what I got, make it better. And then it comes back with you with a version, and then you're like, oh, okay, it's a bit better, but like there's like a couple of other things. So it's almost like having an AI assistant that you keep going back and forth until you get the result that you need. And by the way, I just have like I'm a bit curious because I'm not an AI researcher, but I have seen a lot of cases, and personally for me, it's usually when you get like an API and you want to ask the model something about a particular API. It is like a program, applicable program interface, like from the docs. And what it does is that sometimes it makes up an endpoint, right? So it's something that, oh, that looks great. How come I didn't see that? And then you go to the docs, you try to use it, and it looks like it just made it out.
yeah.
And I'm seeing the same thing happen with people who are also doing research, and they're like, okay, find me a paper that references what I'm doing here. And it makes you, it almost like generates, like it's, excuse my language, but it's just like a BS generator that makes you think, oh, that's really good. Except that when you go to look at it over on the registry, this paper doesn't exist, And so as an AI researchers, what's up with that? How did we come to that point?
I'd like to interject in that. So I know that, as Ezra said, writing a paper or writing the actual paper is the last job that you do when you're, publishing a research paper. The most difficult job is to actually do the research, do the lab experiments. If it's an engineering thing, if you're trying to discover something, it's not just concluding everything in a paper. So that is right now the technology that we have is hardly replicated with GPT. So you can't actually make it invent new things. It can try, but it won't be really good at it. Maybe GPT-5 can be close to that. So yeah, when you consider that writing a paper is the last straw, the last thing that you do in a research process, it makes sense that ChatGPT currently can be utilized pretty heavily. But yeah, as you mentioned, the hallucinations, nobody has really solved that yet. In the end, transformer models just generate the next best word to what you added in. So sometimes the next best word is a BS generator, as you mentioned. In that sense, Saurabh, what do you think in your role as an AI creator? You're using machine learning and LLM ops heavily. Has this kind of hallucination, has these kind of problems affected you or helped you to enhance your products and user engagement and learnings in general?
Yeah, definitely. Lots of pieces here. I've been making some notes. Hallucinations are definitely a huge problem using LLMs, and then this doesn't just affect, or doesn't just stem from something that comes from OpenAI. If you're using Claude, you get the same problem. If you use Llama 2, you get the same problem. If you use Mistral, any of their heavy parameter models, you get the exact same problem. And so, yes, 100% hallucination is always a problem, and you're always trying to just bring that down to 0%, which I don't think will happen in the near future, at least. As a creator, definitely LLMs in general really help with brainstorming. And so I think Petra, you were mentioning, garbage in, garbage out. I kind of paraphrase there, but basically it's up to the user to get what they want out of an AI model when you're talking in strict language. So for example, if Petra was to ask me a question and Dite was going to ask me the exact same question, but in his own words, as a human, my response would differ. It would not be the same just because that's how we are as humans. And so that imitates in conversation with LLMs and AI models. So the way that you prompt, the way that you kind of jog the memory of an LLM versus just trying to get your answer out of one prompt really makes a huge difference. And in order to reduce hallucinations, it's very cost heavy at the moment, but maybe some of you guys are also familiar with multi-agent conversation frameworks. So, for example, Microsoft made a multi-agent framework open source recently, maybe in the last month or two. But what that is you can picture an ecosystem of 3 AI bots, for example. One of them would be, you can think of them as a project manager or a product manager. One of them will be the actual assistant that's doing the work, and then the final one is the user proxy. User proxy is essentially the client managers. They're the one that will talk to you. You you essentially give your task to the user proxy, and then the product manager will take those tasks and send them off to the assistant. And what that happens is you can watch this in real time if you run it locally, but these 3 bots will converse with each other, and they'll actually call each other out on their BS. And it's quite amazing to see. It's really expensive if you run it with GPT-4, especially GPT-4 Turbo. So running it on 3.5 is quite nice to see. But 3.5 has its own drawbacks as well. But the point is that having multi agents to call each other out, that really helps reduce the hallucination.
That's an interesting point. You mentioned Mistral as well, and then the multi-agent setup. We kind of see that in different prompting techniques. For example, chain of thought, when you have one agent and you have it doubt itself. So you're like, think again, and you do that multiple times, and you get the same effect with a comparable effect with lower cost. Now, if we say multi-agent setting, and we see the developer in the midst of that, what do you think, Saurabh? How will the role of a developer evolve, especially in terms of what will be the interface of development? Let's say 10 years in time. We're seeing GPT-5 will be out next year, and we don't know what Gemini and Google will do either. So if we, let's say, get a model which does a better job at building software than we do, than humans do, how would a developer look in your mind coming forward?
Definitely. I don't think jobs are at stake. It's sort of like an accountant from 100 years ago being introduced to the calculator. I think that was a huge step in technology innovation. And then from there, the spreadsheet. And so what all that's really happening is you're empowering certain industries. And so for example, the role of developer, they'll essentially, from our current perspective on the timeline of humans, it's just going to be, they're essentially going to become a super developer. But at their base benchmark, that's just going to be the base benchmark of a developer, that you're going to use these supercharged IDEs like you have Copilot and Visual Studio, but then you also have all these forks like Find and as well as Cursor, where you're having AI really help you within your code. And so at the same time, hallucination within code is something that is much harder alleviate. You can't really use a multi-agent framework at the moment seamlessly, so you need a lot of human intervention. But going back to the first conversation of LLMs, so you're starting to also see different companies really hone in and data mine for a lot of the development work that's happening. So, for example, when Microsoft purchased GitHub, we all know that was an incredible purchase, right? They just data mined everything that GitHub has, and it's part of the LLM. Incredible, and so it's really hard to compete with that. But you have companies like Replit, who their IDE is built. It's built on the browser. You code in the cloud, and so what they're doing, they have a closed framework. That if you're developing in Python, they're able to mine all that data, and then, as well as they have their own AI model called Ghostwriter, which really helps you code. And it's actually, in terms of Python code, Ghostwriter is incredible. It definitely competes with GPT-4 because it has more context. So you're going to start seeing all these mini ecosystems pop up with a more specific lens when it comes to development.
In terms of, knowing that jobs will not be replaced, but what we call a developer will change. We had a workshop during this day called 10x developers are real, and that goes hand in hand with what you're saying. So what we're calling now 10x developers will be the next 1x developer, in terms of speed. On that note, Esra, how are you preparing your engineering team for the changes brought about by LLMs? Is this 10x developer actually a thing? How do you see this in your company?
I think that what we need to look into, and a little bit like tapping into what you guys were talking about before, is that, a large language model or AI model is like a neural network, like we have in biological neural networks. So as long as it isn't smarter or doesn't have more neural connection points than we humans, then we didn't, it's not better than us. We do need to look out for that point, so singularity. And I don't see it happening in the coming 2 years. I think that a lot of people are talking about like AGI, and it's actually here. But when you work in AI in a very day-to-day base, you know that it's not there yet. A lot of problems such as the hallucination part. We do prepare our team, but we as a team that develops AI models, I prepare them more by making sure that they have the tools and the curiosity. So that's how you curate your team, the curiosity of like looking into what is next and what is out there and trying that out and understanding how you can add something to that. That is how you do it as a manager. And as a manager, you also need to be sure that, you understand what they do, how they do that, and how you can do that better. This will be more complex in the coming years. So in maybe 3, 5, or 10 years, this will become more complex. Today, we're like calm and repetitive tasks are getting taken over by AI models. In the future, this will look different. And how I think it will look is that you have engineers, and I managed a lot of engineers throughout my career. You have engineers who are actually like talented. You have engineers who are just doing this because, this is where you have job security. Or you have people who are like talented and interested. They have the whole package. I believe that the people who are just doing this because they have job security, they will fall off because it's going to be more harder. It's like if you compare it with football, just because you like football and you scored a couple of goals, you can't play the Champions League. So that's how it's gonna look like. So not everybody is gonna become an engineer anymore. And this will create newer jobs, of course, or people will go back to other kind of jobs. But the whole engineering ecosystem will change. And that's where, managers and people in particular, their job comes in the engineer themselves, they need to like make sure that they're up to date and they're interested in the next development. They're creative. They're training themselves a lot. And then also like when you have a team, how you prepare them for every new step. And that costs a lot of money because you need to train models. You need to make sure that you have a space for engineers, talented engineers, to test and try and do R&D without maybe even deploying a model or a product. So overall, very exciting times, very expensive times as well from a business perspective, and we all need to work really hard to keep up with what is coming, and make sure that we develop things that are, in line with what we want.
Absolutely. And you mentioned knowing that in the past 2 years, I think we've had a change in the culture of working, especially in the tech industry. Engineering is changing, and that we were experiencing this change in a multifaceted way. I'm curious, Petrit, is also research and labs and doing academic work also changing with the recent machine learning LLM revelations?
Yeah, I mean, it's for sure. I mean, not just industry, but I mean, the whole landscape is now completely different since I would say 1 year ago when the first model of ChatGPT was released. Not the first model, but it was available for everyone. So, of course, it changed everything. But coming to the previous point mentioned, I think one quote from Voltaire said that sometimes perfect is the enemy of good. So sometimes I know that ChatGPT revolutionized the landscape. I'm sure that it will get better, and it will also, competitors will get better models for large language models. But I think that we need ChatGPT, but we need also simpler AI models which can solve sometimes simpler problems in different landscapes in different countries. But I still believe that the developer will be always in the loop. So we have this not human in the loop, but developer in the loop. And I believe that just AI will augment the human capability for solving problems. So increasing our knowledge for different domains. So for sure, AI will not replace human as of now, especially in some critical or safety important domains, I would say.
That makes perfect sense, and we're seeing that in our workshops and in our work during the year, in our AI products which we've launched as well. One significant change, though, which I've noticed in the academic world, is a demolishing of the peer review process. Now, let me explain that. The most impactful papers which have been released and changed how we're doing things have not been peer reviewed. They're white papers released by Google or Facebook, Meta, or OpenAI. And I think you've noticed in the past year, there was this format of releasing papers which have not been peer reviewed in archivex.com, where you just see the paper and everyone is trying to understand what there is. Has that actually changed the peer review process, or is it just an impression considering the amount of announcements that have been made back then, Petrit?
Yeah, very interesting observation, Sunim. Yeah, that is true. But I think it's just a monopoly of this industry of academy, because we as a researcher, sometimes we are not allowed even to cite papers that are not peer reviewed, because even though they are very, breakthrough results in different domains, still they are not peer reviewed. And science is not that. Science, in order to make some progress in science, your peers have to review it, to agree with it or disagree with it, make comments, and this way science moves forward. That is how it works. But in this case, so it's a bit of trade-off between, yes, we can publish papers alone because it's a breakthrough results, but then you have also this trade-off that this is not peer-reviewed, and are these results that were published actually true, or they are just made it perfect for the publishing paper?
Yeah, that's the scientific method, and I think most of the problems which we're facing now, hallucinations, problems with ChatGPT, people saying GPT is getting lazy and all that, these are mainly due to ChatGPT going into production without being peer reviewed. I think they reviewed it internally, but apart from GPT-2, which was outsourced, open source, sorry, GPT-3 and everything else has been closed source. Saurabh, does this change in the way that LLMs are impacting people? Do you think there are the existing limitations are enough to swallow, quote unquote, and look at the potential opportunities that these give?
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% believe that opportunities outweigh any negative implication it has at the moment. And the reason for this is that as time progresses, there's more data on the internet. There's more data that's being consumed. And so what this entails is that, a general LLM that just is a professional in, being an auto mechanic, being a Python developer, or being an aerospace engineer, right? The data is infinite to some degree. And so it's up to the user to be able to hone in on a section, you can say, of an LLM, of a model, to really hone in on that information. And so you're going to start seeing LLMs that specialize only in one small industry, and that would make it more effective, more efficient, way more cost effective. Actually, you're seeing this right now happening across the US in the medical field, for example. And so you'll have different universities or different hospital networks are focusing on specific medical related LLMs, where it will have a lot more data specifically on a niche. And this is going to, you're going to get, fast forward 5 years, you're going to have LLM marketplaces. And I think actually that might happen a lot faster than 5 years from now.
I mean, OpenAI is trying to do that right now with the GPT store. So it's kind of a miniaturized LLM market, if you see it, that way. That makes complete sense on this nature of commercializing LLMs is also impacting the decentralization of software. So Dita, I'm curious, how do you anticipate? You mentioned that people are using LLMs across their digital contracts, and you're using LLMs in different ways in the blockchain field. How do you anticipate blockchain developers to adapt to the integration of LLMs in their workflows?
I think the main challenge that we have now in the blockchain and just a decentralized application field is basically user interfaces. Everyone says that interacting with crypto applications is always tiresome. The UX is not there, and the results are people lose funds, they get fished, and it's just sometimes it's not worth the trouble, right? And so personally, I've been using a lot of the ChatGPT to build front ends, and that has been really, really good. I cannot say the same about the UX, for example. Like if you want to design something for you, is not as good yet, and it still just needs to be done like very compartmentalized. So if you need like a table designed or something, it can do that, but it's not to a point where you can say, all right, design me a whole UI UX for a particular application yet. So I think it cannot think so well visually in the term of like big picture, but it can do that on a small picture. And I think that's a great advancement, because now we can get things out of the door much quicker and keep updating them and kind of going through that development process with way less financial investment than before. But if I can just bring back a topic that you also guys mentioned, and this is the idea that you get what you give in a way. And one thing that kind of raises questions for me is that personally I consider myself to be a senior developer, as there's some of you might be there. I know Tomor just left, but I know for sure he's a senior dev. And if you're a senior developer and you're kind of like trying to build something, what to give it or how to lead it to build the application that you need, right? And that's good. So our generation, this is like a super coding on steroids. But if you see the upcoming generation of developers coming in, they're still not developers, so might not be fully aware how do you lead just the LLM itself to give you the app that you need, because the current frameworks that we have for development, they are built for people. And so one thing that we might just see happen is that we see maybe other frameworks spawning out there that are more like LLM focused and not so much for people, but you do get a good result afterwards.
That's an interesting point. So you're mentioning frameworks which basically develop software, but which are, in other words, fine-tuned for LLMs to use them. That might be miniature frameworks. That might be frameworks which are most efficient when are generated through LLMs. That's an interesting point, which brings back another question in mind. So if it's easier now to build frameworks for LLMs, is it easier also to build AI models? So Esra, you mentioned that you exited in 2012, you exited another company, and then you started working with AI directly. From your recollection, do you think it's easier to build AI models now than in 2012, even if that wasn't an AI company?
I mean, to be honest, from where you stand now and looking back, that wasn't AI, but then it was AI. It was the AI we had, of course.
Yeah.
Of course it's easier. Like, we do everything easier. Like, you can get recipes for cookies easier. You develop, simple lines of code. You test the code. You create workflows. Everything is easier. Of course, with the hallucination, you need to keep checking that. Make sure. So it does require specialization and training for humans as well. So we do need to keep going to school and learning, and we also need to be smart and professional, whatever we do. So of course it's easier. But what we also need to understand is that what I see a lot with these conversations about AI and anything else that is now very innovative is that people are looking into whatever we do from a singular point. So it's either good or it's bad. But good and bad, so the positive and the negatives are connected with each other. Something I always say, and I say this with everything, personal, business, everything, is that the strength of a thing is also the weakness. So this whole part where we talk about the hallucination, do you really think that a company that raised so much funds, has like so many partnerships with the world biggest companies, would release a model that hallucinates that much if it didn't had to, if it wasn't a must? So I believe that this gives the hallucination part, gives the flexibility in the AI brain, so the large language model. It's also what gives us the flexibility in going through life. When you look at a younger kid, it lies a lot more. At my age, I lie less because I know that, I have the strength and the character to get through difficult situations that I might create it for myself. But kids lie a lot more. Like, I didn't eat the cookies. It was my brother or my sister. So this is like, if we look at ChatGPT or any large language model and we're complaining about the hallucination, it's still young. So will lie less, hallucinate less. But I don't believe that it will get out of the way 100%. I believe that it gives the flexibility to create the next word. And that's why you have that. That's the part on the hallucination. But also, like we're talking about, it's going to take our jobs. It's going to change, it's going to end humanity. It's going to create catastrophic results for humanity and our planet. Yes, I think it could. And I think we will see what it's going to look like, but it won't be all like flowers and, rainbows. You can compare to whatever we go through, like as what happened with atomic energy, the nuclear bomb. It gave us the X-ray. It gave us like MRE scans. It gave us so much more healthy solutions where we can thrive as a species. But it also gave us the nuclear bomb, which is very scary. So, like I said, let's go back to what I said in the beginning. Everything the strength is also the weakness. So that's why we should also always, when you look at business applications, looking at like how the world is going to look like for us from an AI view, it will be amazing, but it will also be scary. And that's what I believe, how we should always look at the next thing.
Both comparisons are amazing, and I'm gonna steal this one with the kids lying and then growing. That's an amazing analogy, and also the, let's say, yin yang relationship between everything in life. So you have the possibility to destroy and to create with almost any new novel technology. I'm curious in that sense, Petrit, what do you think? Is there a fair way to assess machine learning models, considering that LLMs are also machine learning models in a way? Is there a way to fairly assess, and how do you, in your research work, assess these models? And then I'd like to also ask this question to you, Esra, considering you have an AI model. I'm curious what kind of processes you use to assess the accuracy of these models as well.
Yeah, I mean, assessing models is fairly sometimes easy because you have the output and you see if you have the correct output from a certain point of view. Let's say when it comes to decision-making system in autonomous driving, let's say, I know if my point of or my goal is to turn right and I don't have any vehicle in front of me and my decision predicts that I can turn right, I mean, that is perfect, sensible output that I also assess as it true. So the accuracy, there are also other metrics that you can assess different models, which we have F1 score, ROC score. These are very technical terms, but the main point sometimes when it comes to such system, as I mentioned before, is the interpretability. So whenever you come to a decision, you need to know why it came to that decision. So in case also of hallucination, you need why the model didn't predict it the correct way or why the information is missing. And we can use this, as Esra said, to see as an opportunity for growth and see how we can improve such models to make it even better, not just for a decision-making system, but as I said, it's critical sometimes when it's for healthcare, for medicine, also when it comes to life of humans. That is the main thing.
Yeah, Esra?
So what we do is we focus on document intelligence. So our models are able to read documents. So you have to think about like hard copy, so your notes, but it could also be resumes, any document in the enterprise field. So we only do B2B now. And our current focus is the recruitment department in an enterprise company. So we read resumes and explain to you if they are a good fit for your company or not. And we go beyond that, the normal like keyword matching. We look at like, how is your company? What is your company culture? What is this person from? How is this person culturally? Where they worked, how they are, where they are in their career path. So when we write the paper about the accuracy that we accumulated from our model, is we look at a couple of things. So first, we look at recognition of keywords or understanding the resume compared to a job description. So you have a couple of fields. So you have like location, you have personal details, you have skills, and you have like also hidden meanings within resume. So humans use a lot more common sense than we realize, because we assume that everybody, has a little bit of worldview and understand that if I'm a PHP developer, that I know a certain other aspect of like basic HTML as well. So these are all the things, all the data that we collect. So we look into thousands of resumes and match them and see the results per field. So it's a lot of work. So AI can't do that. A large language model can do that. And then we calculate like Peter. I would say Peter, but I can't pronounce it. Sorry. So what he just said, like, so we have the F1 score, the recall, and the precision score. So that's actually like how well was it performing on all of these fields. That's the simplest way to explain it. And that's one part. And the second part that we research is that real world, what happened in the real world. So we have data sets, and we share these data sets with recruiters. And we ask them, if you have a candidate group, like 10 candidates, and you send them to your customers or to the manager who's going to hire, which one did he hire? And did this person stay on that job? So you need time to research that, which we did. And then we look into if our model was able to pick out the right person and the person who stayed. And then make a top three. So the best, and then, the best, the good one, and, could be good, but maybe not. And that's also what we research and try to understand, if it's able to look beyond good and bad. And this is really what we're looking for in AI models today, that it doesn't, just give you a static answer, but can go beyond, and you can only do that by, doing long-term research and see results in the real what humans did compared to AI. So that's kind of like how we work. And I think that a lot of people who are going in depth in their own vertical, so healthcare maybe, or that's a big application, or supply chains. I think that a lot of us are now trying to reach that point where it goes beyond what we can do.
That's fascinating work. And to be honest, if this was a sales call, I'd be sold. But yeah, it's I think everyone is impressed with the product which you built, and definitely the AI developments lately have been a stepping stone for most dreams which people had to build products beforehand. So I know that right now using AI, using LLMs particularly, kind of has a nature of training a model itself, because you try to train yourself to write the right prompt. So I'd like to extend this question also to Saurabh and Dita. I know that if you had a chance to train models, how do you go about that? If not, how have you? What kind of tips and tricks can you share on the way that you use LLMs to basically not find yourself in a constant loop of trying to make it do what you want to get done? Is there any tips and tricks in that sense of quote unquote training an LLM to use it best for your interest?
I think the rabbit hole of training an LLM goes really deep, and it can become really, really expensive. So that's a large barrier to entry right now for a lot of companies. And so the easiest way that I would recommend it, it's there's two stages, but basically utilizing OpenAI. So at the enterprise level, OpenAI has a dashboard that you are able to train your own LLMs. And I do advise people to just go browse and get familiarized with that aspect. Obviously, training it yourself, you'll see the costs. The costs are there, and they're quite clear, but it's definitely substantial. And then the second piece is you mentioned it yourself, which is OpenAI is definitely um, trying to familiarize that process with the general public. And so at the very base level, it's creating your own GPTs. And so there are various methods you could use to create your own GPTs. And one would be the easiest way is, uploading your own documentation. Uploading your own documentation, and you have a very baseline GPT. Second one is actually importing a schema from another website that houses even more data and has different access. And so, for example, you can connect GPT to Zapier, and then that opens another rabbit hole. But before GPTs exist, the notion of GPTs existed. The real talk behind LLMs was how effective and how clean of a vector database can you create. And so another popular company that I would like to highlight is a website called pinecone.io. And that's where a user can really learn about creating vector databases and what it really takes to make a highly efficient LLM. And so, it's not a simple answer to like how to train your own LLM. There's different various ways at the moment, and that's just because there's more than one way to do this.
That's vector databases, GPTs, embedding your own information. That's all great ways to know that you're building a custom GPT. What do you think, Dita? Is that what are your thoughts in regard to this?
Yeah, so I haven't built any of them. I took some interest and kind of scoped out the weekend project to do like a spell checker at some point, but I haven't done it yet. There's too many side projects from side projects. But I have been using some custom GPTs that a few people did. So if you look at Cedric from Startup Yard here in Prague, he basically did a custom GPT that criticizes your pitch deck, right? So it's kind of like you give it your pitch deck, and now Cedric, he has looked at thousands of pitch decks, etc., and he tends to be very French with his feedback, which basically is like a lot of nuance on on how your pitch deck sucks, but that's how you get it to become better. And so I have used that to just kind of criticize my idea, see what's the bullet points in there, what can be better, because ultimately that's what people would be doing. And I also had a meeting with a crypto auditor for one of the bigger companies, the top 3 that do auditing these days. And I was taking a lot of notes on how they go about doing their smart contract auditing, to try to see whether that could be like automated to a level where it is right now. Because if you look at what they're doing, it's basically an algorithm, and it's just an algorithm with a lot of ifs and buts that they apply to it. But I was kind of surprised to learn that the way that they do that is very much siloed, even within one auditing company. They do have some standards, but then each auditor, they go on and they have their own method in a way. And so I could see that being replicated across the big 4 companies, etc., where they do have 2 components. One is their data, and 2 is they have a way of doing stuff, right? And this also applies to you over at Sogody, because you do have like a way to do it. You have customers, and I think it's going to be really exciting to see these very closed knit type of GPTs. And then the question would be that if you build this type of algorithm and it keeps producing good results, can it also have its own reputation? Right, like KPMG has its own reputation, or Deloitte, etc. And the way to do that, you can of course then integrate different blockchain strategies that help track reputation and make sure that the result that you're getting is like certified on the fly by the institution who made the algorithm, and all of that. So I think it's quite exciting, but I haven't done something hands-on, but it definitely see the benefit.
Mentioning, if building something with LLM, be that a digital contract or more, and then will it have a reputation? That's an interesting thought, and it's something I think which will worry people along the line at some point, when you can delegate more and more work to LLMs, and then who do you blame if something goes wrong? I think we have 5 minutes on the clock, so I'd like to open the Q&A. So for anyone who is online, they can just raise their hand, or if anyone has a question for our panelists here, also raise their hand. So Dilva.
Hi everyone. Thank you for this amazing discussion. I enjoyed every bit of it. Earlier today during the summit, we were talking about something called functional illiteracy. So basically people that will come to a point where they can perform the task, can complete the task, can get the job done, but they don't really understand what's going behind it or how it was done. Do you think that this will be a problem in the future, or maybe it's just the benefit of AI that we get to move on into more creative tasks and leave the mundane task to AI, so that we don't really have to worry about what's going on there? How do you see this one? I'm curious to hear an answer from all of you, anyone who would like to answer.
All right. First in, first grab. Who has any thoughts on this?
All right. Okay, first I grab the microphone. Yeah, so well, one thing that I saw a cool project deals on a previous hackathon that I was, is that some guys, they build a chat bot that lets you do Socratic reasoning with a chat bot. And so it's almost like are we getting kind of dumber by just using ChatGPT? There's like a level of that, but then also we could use it to kind of sharpen our intellectual saw by doing it on scale. Instead of just having like one teacher somewhere, you have someone that can do it in a scale for like millions of people, and then they can learn how to think from first principles. And then hopefully there will be more companies coming in and building their very specialized ChatGPT kind of like educational apps, so that we do not descend into a dystopia of like idiosyncrasy. At least I hope.
That makes complete sense. Before we close, any thoughts on this, Pedret, Sarah?
Yeah, I think
Esra?
functional illiteracy is already like, I don't know about Europe. I think it's less higher in Europe, but in the US, I think I'm in the US now. It's around, I think 20 to 25%. So people, in a way, people are dumber than we think they are. We just hide it very well. This will grow.
That was good.
But in the future, this will grow even more. And is AI one of the reasons? Yes. And this is exactly what Mark Tegman, the cosmologist and the physicist, that's exactly what he talks about, that the dangers of AI, the more dumber we get, illiterate, and less skilled we get, the more it's going to be difficult for us to survive. This is one of those points that we're talking about. So good education, governments, this is very important, that they should focus on, education and people going to school and using less social media, like people who are on X all the time, and read a lot more books is very important. Are we doing it? No. Are we gonna, see the repercussions of them? Definitely. This is gonna be a problem.
Right. Before we close, I'd like to also give the opportunity to Sorab and Petrit if they have any additional thoughts to this question. We will not be able to get more questions, but shoot them, and I'll direct message each of our panelists in Twitter to get your answers. So Sorab, Petrit.
Yeah. So I do. Everyone knows the term "fake it till you make it," and so I just want to say that that's going to grow exponentially. You're going to see people from one industry, becoming a professional in another. And I don't want to say I don't want to say that they can, but at the end of the day, like, we live in a world of commerce, and so if they're able to convince somebody that they're a professional in a certain industry, and they're able to make that sale, it's going to happen a lot more.
Yeah, maybe I can continue. Yes, maybe I'm young in academia. I can give you the perspective in this sense. When we were also students, or when I had time to work with students, opportunity to work with students also in Pristina, but also here, I was also interested to push students to see everything what is also behind the curtains, how things work, not just to get it done. And I see this trends also here even more every day, that people don't really care now how, let's say, a base 64 converter works anymore, or how do they translate a word from one language to the other. So I think it's a trend that a student wants just to get it done. So it's more result oriented. People just want to get it done and don't care how things work in behind. This is the academic perspective. I don't know. Again, I'm quite young in this field, and I don't know if that is a trend which is now going on for a longer time. But also the perspective of developers, I think, to borrow a term from computer networking, there will be, I think, thin developers and thick developers. Developers that would like to go deep into things, and thin developers which don't know how things work, but just can plug things from everywhere, make a product, and they are in that market. So I think we have to know the limitations and try to downplay this as much as possible, and use the good side of AI as much as possible.
That's a great point. And I think I will be using this thin and thick developer idea, but not in the US, because I'm afraid I'll be canceled.
Yes.
They don't have the contest, yeah. So I sincerely thank our distinguished panelists for their time and expertise. Thank you, Dita. Thank you, Esra. Thank you, Petrit. Thank you, Sarab. It was a great pleasure. Last but not least, we thank Sogody for supporting us and making this summit and every year possible. I am deeply appreciative of your time and the expertise and knowledge that you shared with us today. We'll be taking a 30-minute break and move on to our closing act, Chris Fitkin, our keynote speaker, see everyone in 30 minutes. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Have a good one.
Thank you.
Thank you.